Hi there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage, and this video I'm going to go through my opinions of Civilization VII and what I like and dislike about it and whether or not I think you should buy it. I generally avoid doing reviews because they tend to, well, they are highly subjective. But I've played a lot of Civilization V and a lot of Civilization VI over the years, and even Beyond Earth, and I was really excited for Civilization VII, and I wanted to give my honest opinions of it. I am going to start by saying that Firaxis did give me a free copy of Civilization VII, so I didn't pay for it. I did actually have it on pre-order before they gave me the free copy, so I was intending to pay for it. But I'm kind of glad I didn't. So, even though they gave me a copy, that doesn't mean that this is just going to be positive. I certainly am going to be critical of it. But what I will say is, I have been having fun with it. I've not put a huge amount of hours in, but I have been playing it over the last week, and I have mostly enjoyed it. Now that might just be because it's new. It's the first new Civilization game we've had in 8 years, and it's something different. But I can't help but compare it to Civilization 6 and Civilization 5. Now, I don't know if any of you have watched or read any of the material that came out of Firaxis before the game released, particularly the developer live streams. Because a lot of the changes that they made in Civilization 7 were to address the issues that older Civilization games had, where the game became a bit of a slog at certain points. There was lots of busy work, there were lots of points in the game where you would just be hitting end turn. Most of these happened towards the end of the game. So if you were playing a game and you had a lot of cities towards the end, particularly if you were already close to winning, you'd end up just hitting next turn and next turn and next turn while you were waiting for things to progress, often having to queue up buildings and units you didn't need in cities just for the game to stop hassling you that their build queue was empty. You've also got builders and workers who, again, towards the end of the game, once you'd already upgraded all of the tiles you needed to, you would be having to constantly give these workers and builders orders just to get them to do something. You could just put them to sleep, but they were just units hanging around. This problem did affect Civilization 5 more than 6 because workers were persistent and builders in Civ 6 were expended after a few uses. But it was one more thing that needed to be managed. And if you had a big army and you were having to move units around, that was quite a slog as well. The units were slow moving, they got in each other's way. It was often trying to shuffle every piece across the board one tile at a time, and that became quite frustrating. But I think the problem that Civilization 7 has is Firaxis came up with about 5 different solutions to that problem and implemented them all, and I think that's to the game's detriment, because while they have removed some of the slog from the end game, they've also made the early game less interesting and less interactive. So if we go through some of the big changes that Civilization 7 has compared to the previous ones and why I don't particularly like them or why I don't think they work so well. So one of the big things now in Civilization 7 is that you can actually mix and match your leader with a civilization. And if you're not already aware, there's another mechanic in Civilization 7 where the game is split into 3 smaller games. You've got the Antiquity Age, the Exploration Age, and the Modern Age. So at the beginning of the game, you select your leader, and you pick your civilization from one of the 10 starting choices. At the end of the Antiquity Age, you keep the same leader, but then you have to choose a new civilization from another selection. And some of that selection is actually gated behind you completing certain achievements within that game. And then when you get to the end of the Exploration Age, before moving into the Modern Age, you pick your third and final civilization again from another list. Now, it does have more variety and more replayability because you can mix and match, so you've got different combinations you can choose from. But the fact that you can only pick from 10 civilizations initially, And then I think at the moment it's a maximum of 10 on the second age and a maximum of 10 on the third age if you unlock them all during play. It still doesn't give you a huge number of combinations. And I have to say, I think the selection of leaders and civilizations that ship with Civilization 7 are C tier at best. There's some really obvious ones that are conspicuous by their absence, and there are some that in there that, yes, I understand that they've tried to be more inclusive and representative, and they've tried to add some more of the obscure civilizations and the less well-known leaders in there. But all of the really well-known historical ones that we've seen many times before in previous Civilization games, a lot of those are gone. Now, whether they intend to bring those back later on in expansions and DLC is quite possible, but I don't know, it feels like a lot of the character is gone from the selection that is given. So I don't particularly like that mix and matching thing. It just doesn't feel like it works well. It's weird. No one can accuse Civilization games of being historically accurate, but it just doesn't sort of feel right. It doesn't feel right to me anyway. Like I said, these opinions are all subjective. So then we've got this issue with the ages. So you start off in the Antiquity Age, which is about exploration. And exploration of the one continent you're on, because this is the other thing. You start on a single continent, usually, with 3 other civilizations. So it's essentially a 4-player game in the Antiquity Age, and you're using your scouts to uncover the map. You'll also find now that barbarians and city-states have kind of been merged into one mechanic. So you find these little independent cities that can be hostile. They're not all hostile, but they essentially work like barbarians. And you can nurture them and befriend them and have them grow into city-states. So they've kind of mixed 2 mechanics in together there. And you've got your tech tree and you've got your culture tree. But then once you reach the end of that age, the game almost resets. You do get to keep your settlements, your cities, although technically towns, and I'll come back to that. You do get to keep your settlements, any ones that you've built and any that you've taken from other players or the AI, you get to keep. But city-states and independent cities generally are reset, and your units are reset. Some of them you are given recompense for. You're given new units to replace them at the start of the next stage. But there are some that you just straight up lose. There are also buildings that you build in one age that don't carry over to the next stage. So they basically become obsolete and you have to replace them. And I'm not particularly sure that I like that, because nothing feels permanent. You spend time building something up in one age, only for it to then be reset at the beginning of the next stage, when you move on to a new tech tree and a new civics tree. And again, Firaxis have done this to try and keep pacing evenly spread. It doesn't really have an early game, a mid game, and an end game. It just sort of has 3 mid games. It's a bit weird the way it works. But coming back to what I was saying about cities and towns, in Civilization 7, every time you've found a new settlement, it starts off as a town, with the exception of the capital, which is always a city. The difference between a town and a city is that a town doesn't have any production. It cannot build units or buildings with production. And any production it generates is sent to whatever the closest city is as food. You can use gold to buy buildings and units within those towns, but essentially they are automated. You don't have to do anything with them. Now again, I think this is one of Firaxis it's one of their mechanics for reducing busy work late game, because you're unlikely to have 20 cities. You might have 4 or 5 cities and 15 towns. And it's only going to be the 4 or 5 cities that are prompting you to queue things up in the build queue. So it removes some of that busy work. Another thing that's changed, and all of these mechanics are stacking on top of each other, is you're really penalised from building wide in Civilization 7. For a start, you have a settlement cap. Now, you can increase that cap, and you can go over that cap, but going over that cap gives you happiness penalties. Now, happiness isn't something new. There's always been something within Civilization games that have been designed to constrain how wide you can build your empire. In Civilization 6, we had amenities and housing. In Civilization Beyond Earth, we had health. In Civilization 5, we had happiness. And the happiness system in Civ 7 is very similar to the one that was in Civ 5. So the more cities you build, or the more towns you build, the more population you have, the more unhappiness you generate. And cities start rioting, they start destroying the buildings within them, and eventually they can flip over and go to another player. So you're really discouraged from having a large number of cities or a large number of towns. Another mechanic that is added on is the way in which your cities expand. So you no longer have workers and builders, so they were removed as another method to try and get rid of that extra busy work. And instead, when you gain a new population in a city or a town, you assign them to a tile, and that is how you gain more tiles for that settlement. Now, what this means is that you're using your your populations to improve tiles rather than a builder or worker, and you can't move those populations around. Now, it's not a bad idea in itself, the mechanic is fine, but in the early game, when you've only got 1 or 2 cities that take 5, 10, 20 turns to build anything, there isn't a lot to do. You're moving your scout around the map, you might have 1 or 2 military units, but what you don't have is a worker or a builder to go round and decide what to upgrade. You can't move your populations around between different tiles to optimize production or food or science generation. You're kind of stuck. There are ways to move them later on depending on if you build over existing tiles. But it's just I certainly found in my experience that at the beginning of each age, it felt like there was a lot less to do. And I didn't find that fun. Now, it's not all negative. One thing that they have added in, which I think is absolutely brilliant, are the commanders. So you get commanders for land armies, for navies, and for air units. And a commander works a little like a great general, in they provide bonuses to the troops that are around them within their command radius, but more so, you can assign units to a commander, and they can be packed into them. Initially 4 units on one commander, but you can upgrade it to 6. And you can pack up to 6 units into a commander and move them all as one on a single tile. Now, I think that is absolutely brilliant. And it allows you to move units much quicker, because you're not getting in each other's way. They all move with the commander, with the general. You can promote that commander, so every time one of the units within that commander's command radius does damage to an enemy, the XP goes to the commander, not the units. So your units never get promotions. It's only your commander that gets promotions. And the commander's promotions can be spent to improve the commander and the bonuses he gives to all of the units within his command radius. So if you lose a unit, it's not the end of the world, because you can replace it with the same unit and it will have the same bonuses if you put it with that same commander, because the bonuses are coming from the commander. It does mean the commanders are highly valuable, and you have to make sure you don't get those killed, because then you do lose the promotions. Now, I like it. It's really good. It helps you to move units across the map, and it certainly solves that endgame problem of having a unit stationed on every tile and having to shuffle them around like chess pieces to get something through the lines. But it does cause another bit of a problem. So it's not a perfect solution. And the problem it causes is you often find yourself swapping units between armies, moving them back and forwards to try and balance them out, because you might want to have several balanced armies that have some archers and some swordsmen and maybe a cavalry unit in there and a siege unit. Or maybe you've got one commander who you've specialised into infantry bonuses, so you just want to have all of your melee units in there. And you might have another commander who you've put all the points into cavalry bonuses, so you want all the cavalry with that commander. Now, your commanders are persistent between the ages, so it is worth levelling them up and keeping them. But it does mean that there's an extra bit of busy work moving units around. And that is what my total overall experience with Civilization 7 has been. In the early game, it doesn't feel like there's very much to do. When you're at war, you're quite busy because you're moving a lot of units around, but it's not frustrating anymore. That's a very good plus. But when you're not at war, all you're doing is shuffling a few units around, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot to do. I was actually surprised how often I was just clicking next turn and going, oh, haven't got anything to do on this turn unless I want to move a few units around for the sake of moving them. There's no longer any trade of resources through diplomacy. There is still a sort of a merchant caravan system where you can make trade routes with neighbouring civilizations to gain resources from them, but the resource system now, a resource basically just gives flat bonuses to the city that it's assigned to, rather than being something that can be stockpiled and traded. There is still diplomacy, but it's very limited, and again, it feels like something that's been taken out of the game. So the question is this something that's going to change in a future expansion? Is it going to be like Civilization 6, where things from 5 were just missing and then kind of got added in later on with expansions? I don't know the answer to that. Would I go out and buy Civilization 7 right now if I didn't already have it? I'm not sure that I would. Civilization 5 and Civilization 6 both weren't received that well at release. They certainly got a lot better once the first and second expansions for them came out, and it's probably going to be the same for Civilization 7. If you're a hardcore Civ fan, or if you just love 4X games, maybe you do want to pick it up because it is still a good game. It has potential. Like I said, I have been enjoying the time I've spent with it. I don't think it's a bad game at all. I just question some of the decisions that they've made. I see what they were aiming for. They wanted to get rid of the tedium and the clicking next turn and the having to micromanage loads of units. But that is the problem that Civ has always suffered from. You're either clicking next turn, next turn, next turn with nothing to do, or each turn takes 20 minutes because you're having to shuffle around 100 units and tell 20 cities to build a pointless building. And I don't think Civilization has fixed that problem. They've tried to fix the problem, but they've done something to the formula that's made the game feel less fun. We all complain over the tedium, we all complain over the busy work, but I think it's part of what makes the games what they are. Now that might be my subjective opinion, because I also play a lot of grand strategy games, and they're by design overly complex with a lot of pointless busy work. I'm certainly glad that I didn't go and spend £120 or $130 on Civilization 7. Would I pick it up now for 60? I don't think I would. Not from what I've seen. I think if I went back to Civilization 6 or Civilization 5, I'd have just as much fun with them, even though they're older games, as I'm having with Civilization 7 right now. I'm not certain that, even though I am currently having fun with Civilization 7, I'm not certain that I'm still going to be having fun with it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't see it being a Civilization game in its current state that's going to make me want to keep starting a new game and trying a new leader or with a new civilization, I don't feel like I'm going to get that variety and satisfaction that I did every time I started a new game in Civilization 5 and Civilization 6. So I want to reiterate, I'm not saying that it's a bad game, but I do feel that it's a bit of a step backwards from Civilization 5 and 6. I understand that Firaxis have tried to make changes to address issues that the previous games have had. I think they've gone some way to addressing those issues, but I think they've not fully fixed them, and they've also created some new issues along the way. So I would really stop and think before you put down your money on Civilization 7 in its current form. That said, it's up to you, right? I'm just some guy on the internet who's been playing the game for a week. I've not been disappointed with the time I've spent with it, but I'm speaking as somebody who didn't pay for it. So I might have been a lot more critical had I have put down £120 for it with the game that I got. So there we are. That is my opinion on Civilization 7. I think it has potential. I think possibly with expansions it can get up to where Civilization 5 and 6 are. With mods, it's also probably going to improve drastically as well. I think it needs a better selection of civilizations and leaders. I think some of the mechanical changes are questionable, even though they were done with good intent. But my personal opinion is I don't find the gameplay as interesting and enthralling as I did in Civilization 5 and Civilization 6. So let me know your opinions. Have you played it already? What do you think about it? Maybe you've just seen other people playing it on YouTube or Twitch and you've watched a lot of streams. I'm interested in hearing everyone's opinions, so please do leave them in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing for future videos. I am currently working on a playthrough of Civilization 7. I intend to do a new player guide for it as well, so there will be some more Civilization 7 content coming. How long that is maintained for, well, I guess that's on Firaxis. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, goodbye for now.